like a 5,000-pound bomb hit the middle of town and blew up.
Oh my God!
Oh! I knew the direction it was heading, and I knew my baby was in that path.
The date was April 27th, 2011, and in a single afternoon, the sky stopped being a backdrop and became a weapon. Not one tornado, not 5, not 10, 224 tornadoes. One day, 6 states, 316 lives. This is the story of the deadliest tornado outbreak in nearly a century. And what happened inside the hours, most people will never forget. Imagine waking up on a Wednesday morning and checking the weather like any other day. You see the warnings. You've seen them before. You tell yourself it'll be fine. But the meteorologists watching their radar screens that morning weren't fine. They were watching something they'd never seen in their careers. A storm system so massive, so perfectly aligned with destruction, that some of them quietly feared what was coming before they ever said it out loud. What unfolded over the next 18 hours wouldn't just break records. It would break entire communities. It would rewrite what Americans thought they understood about the word shelter. This is April 27th, 2011, the day the South was brought to its knees. It didn't arrive without warning. That's the part that haunts the scientists who studied it. For days leading up to April 27th, meteorologists across the country had been watching a slow-motion catastrophe assembling itself over the southern plains. Warm, moisture-heavy air was being pulled northward from the Gulf of Mexico. Cold air was descending hard from Canada. Somewhere in between, over Alabama, Mississippi, Tennessee and their neighbors, those two forces were about to collide with a violence that the atmosphere rarely produces. Scientists would later describe the conditions as among the most favorable for violent tornadoes ever recorded in human history. On April 25th, the system announced itself. Tornadoes tore across Texas and Arkansas. One stayed on the ground for over an hour near Valonia, killing 4 people. By April 26th, another wave hit. More warnings, more sirens, more people trying to convince themselves that the worst was still unlikely. They were wrong. Before most of Alabama had poured their first cup of coffee, the sky was already working. A fast-moving squall line swept through the state in the early morning hours, spinning off nearly 3 dozen tornadoes before 8 a.m. Over 50 people were injured in those pre-dawn strikes alone. Then briefly, the storms eased. The sky cleared. Children went to school. People drove to work. That pause was not relief. It was the atmosphere catching its breath. At 2:28 in the afternoon, the final and most catastrophic wave was unleashed. What followed would last 7 hours. In those 7 hours, 94 tornadoes touched down. 15 of them reached EF4 or EF5 intensity. The violent end of the scale where winds exceed 165 miles per hour, and where the concept of shelter begins to feel almost meaningless. All 15 of those violent tornadoes struck within that single 7-hour window. Meteorologists had never documented anything like it. At 3 p.m., a tornado dropped from the clouds in Marion County, Alabama. It wasn't immediately clear what it would become. Within minutes, it became obvious that this was something different. The winds climbed to 210 miles per hour. The enhanced Fujita scale rates destruction up to EF5. This tornado was pushing the very edge of that classification, the outer limit of what the science of measurement can even describe. It reached Hackleburg, In the span of a few minutes, 75% of the town ceased to exist. The Wrangler Jeans factory, where hundreds of families earned their livelihoods, was completely obliterated. Pairs of jeans were recovered more than 40 miles away. The high school was leveled to its foundation. Downtown Hackleburg didn't sustain damage. It simply stopped existing. 18 people lost their lives there. But the tornado wasn't finished. It continued northeast into Phil Campbell. There, well-built brick homes weren't damaged. They were removed from their foundations entirely, leaving nothing but bare concrete slabs and anchor bolts pointing at an empty sky. A 25-foot section of road was ripped clean from the ground. Trees didn't just lose their leaves or branches, they lost their bark. The wood was stripped raw, like something had skinned them. Cars were found wrapped around those stripped stumps like twisted aluminum foil. 21 more people died in Phil Campbell. The tornado continued through Mount Hope, through Tanner, through Harvest. Along that path, a Navy veteran looked out his window and saw it coming. He had seconds. He threw himself over his daughter and held on as everything around them collapsed. She survived. He did not. By the time the tornado finally lifted, it had traveled over 100 miles and had been on the ground for nearly 2.5 hours. 71 people were dead along its path. It remains, to this day, the deadliest tornado in Alabama's history. At 3:47 p.m., while the Hackleburg tornado was still tearing northward, another EF5 touched down near Smithville, Mississippi. This one moved at nearly 70 miles per hour. There was almost no time to react. The winds reached 205 miles per hour. In Smithville, homes weren't just destroyed. The tornado scoured the earth itself, digging more than a foot into the ground in some areas, as if the storm was searching for something beneath the surface. And then there was the red SUV. In what became one of the most extraordinary damage indicators ever documented in tornado history, that vehicle was picked up off the ground and hurled through the air for half a mile. It didn't land on the ground. It struck the town's water tower, high above the street, leaving a visible dent in the metal before being thrown another quarter mile and coming to rest, crushed into a ball just a few feet across. 16 people died in Smithville. At 4:43 p.m., a new supercell began producing a tornado in rural Greene County, Alabama. Over the next 90 minutes, it would carve an 80-mile path of destruction directly through the heart of one of Alabama's largest cities. What made the Tuscaloosa tornado different from every other that day, what burned it into the national consciousness, was that every major local television station had cameras on it. The entire city watched it approach live. This will be a day that goes down in state history. All you can do is pray for these people. The massive wedge churned into Tuscaloosa, with winds reaching 190 miles per hour. At its widest, the damage path stretched 1.5 miles across. Entire neighborhoods on the west side of the city were erased. Not damaged, erased. Well-constructed homes in Rosedale were swept clean off their foundations. Debris from Tuscaloosa was later found raining down over Birmingham, more than 20 miles away. In approximately 6 minutes, 12% of Tuscaloosa was destroyed. 7,000 people lost their jobs in that window. 44 people died in Tuscaloosa. The tornado pushed into the Birmingham suburbs and killed 22 more in Pleasant Grove before finally dissipating. The final toll along that single path 64 dead, more than 1,500 injured, $2.4 billion in damage, the costliest single tornado in American history at that time. When darkness fell that night, Alabama sat in a silence it had never experienced. Over 650,000 customers had lost power across the Tennessee Valley. The Hackleburg tornado had severed transmission lines from the Browns Ferry nuclear plant. Some communities wouldn't see electricity again for 2 weeks. In 18 hours, 62 tornadoes had struck Alabama alone. The state typically sees 50 in an entire year. Across the full 4-day outbreak, 368 tornadoes across 21 states. 4 EF, 5 tornadoes on April 27th alone. The first time that had been documented since records began. Total damage exceeding $10 billion. In Alabama alone, 238 people were killed by tornadoes. More than 2,000 were injured. 35 counties were declared disaster zones. What made this outbreak uniquely catastrophic was something that surprised even the experts. The majority of those who died were not in mobile homes. They were in permanent single-family houses, brick homes, built homes, homes that people believed were safe. The tornadoes hit populated areas at EF4 and EF5 intensity. For many people, there was simply no structure strong enough to protect them. 2 days after the outbreak, President Barack Obama walked through the destructions in Tuscaloosa. Standing among the ruins, he said he had never seen anything like it in his life. And yet, in those ruins, something remarkable was already happening. Emergency responders worked through the black, powerless night using flashlights and bare hands. Volunteers from neighboring states arrived before anyone officially asked for help. Strangers pulled other strangers from collapsed buildings. Neighbors who had lost everything they owned turned around and went looking for someone who had lost more. The same communities that the tornado had tried to erase began rebuilding before the storms were even finished. New schools opened in Hackleburg. A memorial park was built in Tuscaloosa on the ground where the destruction was worst. The 2011 outbreak changed how America prepares for severe weather. Improved warning systems, strengthened building codes, and expanded public outreach campaigns. The average warning time on April 27th was 24 minutes, and scientists believe that those minutes, that handful of minutes, saved an unknowable number of lives. The Tuscaloosa Memorial bears an inscription that says everything. Called by circumstance, burdened by tragedy, yet inspired by confident hope, the fury of Mother Nature was met by the best of humanity. 324 people died in the 2011 super outbreak. Each one had a name. Each one had a family waiting for them somewhere. Each one had a morning routine, a favorite song, something they were planning to do that weekend. The tornadoes of April 27th took their lives. But they could not take what those lives meant. They could not erase the courage of the people who survived. They could not undo the compassion of the strangers who showed up in the dark and started digging. Every storm ends. Every sky eventually clears. But the way people hold each other when the world is falling apart, that kind of strength doesn't have a rating on the Fujita scale. And it never will. If this story moved you, if it made you think about the people who lived through that day and the ones who didn't, take a second and hit that like button. It genuinely helps this channel reach more people. Subscribe if you want more stories like this one. History that most people don't know, told the way it deserves to be told. And dropped something in the comments. I've read every single one. And next time, we go to Plainfield, where an invisible F5 tornado emerged from a wall of rain with no warning at all. And in less than 2 minutes, an ordinary summer afternoon became one of the deadliest forecasting failures in American history.